Greetings, guys and girls, and welcome to my channel. I am a former history teacher with a master's degree in both history and in education. But given the current climate with COVID and also the politics now involved in teaching history and education, I have taken a bit of a break from the classroom and have decided to start making a series of videos that cover topics that I might not have been able to teach within the classroom that I am actually interested in. As the series progresses, I hope that my recordings as well as the videos get better. That said, I'm learning video and recording as I go, so I wouldn't hold my breath on the quality improving too fast. Today, I would like to start the first video talking about a topic that always interested me from the time I was a child, which were German battleships in World War II. Now, why would a child be interested in German battleships in World War II? Well, that's largely in part from my father, who had an extensive collection of model ships that he created with his father, many of them from different navies of World War II, but the predominant ones were German. As a kid, I had a love of Star Wars. It's not too hard to take a look at the Imperial Star Destroyer and the Bismarck from the front and see quite a stark comparison between the two. The uniforms of the Imperial Navy from Star Wars as well as the German Navy also share lots of similarities, and even the destruction of the Bismarck could be compared to the destruction of the Death Star in Star Wars, where a group of fighters is able to exploit a weakness in the design of the ships and able to blow them up. Basically in a David and versus Goliath type of situation. The Bismarck class battleships were actually a compromise design. They weren't what Hitler wanted in terms of size or firepower, but he did not want to anger the British at the time and provoke them unnecessarily before he was ready to start his war. The Bismarck-class battleships are often maligned as being overrated by many modern historians because of the fact that they are hyped up as being more than what they were. One has to remember, though, that at the time that they were launched, they were the most powerful ships on the sea. Aircraft carriers had not yet proven their full capability of being the dominant naval war platforms on the sea. And so the hype the Bismarck got was somewhat deserved at the beginning of the war. Now, could they face a Missouri-class ship later in the war? Most likely not. But, on any given day, a lucky hit could decide the factor of a battle. Although the two ships of the Bismarck class are regarded by many as representing the peak of German battleship design, they are actually, as I mentioned, political compromises. They followed along with the construction patterns of German warships from World War I. They were highly influenced by the Baden class. That was the last of the World War I German battleships. They were actual true battleships, though, and not pocket battleships like the Graf Spee, which was basically an armored cruiser with light battleship armament, but more in the line of a battle cruiser, even if you want to stretch it that far. The Scharnhorst and Gneisenau were considered battleships by the Germans, but they, in fact, too, were more in the line of a battle cruiser, given their armament was not really substantial for that of a battleship. The Bismarck class did, though, have 8 15-inch guns. Those were able to launch shells basically the size of a Volkswagen at other ships. The Bismarck class battleships employed 2 guns per turret, which was limiting in factor because the Germans were never able to really develop a gun loading system to allow 3 guns per turret in the 15-inch class. They were able to do so in the Scharnhorst, which is why they had 9 guns total, whereas the Bismarck only had 8 spread over for turrets. The Bismarck and the Tirpitz had really good armor schemes, which would come into play with the destruction of the Bismarck, where it took a pounding but was not going to sink on its own. It had to be scuttled by the German crew, long after the ship was able to stop firing. The Bismarck, of course, is the most famous for its destruction of the hood. Looking at history, and one has to wonder what would have happened had the Bismarck gone after the Prince of Wales as well, as opposed to just sinking the hood, and then return to its port of origin. But the orders at the time were to commerce race, and so they went out and they did the commerce raiding. Of course, that did not go well for the Bismarck, as it was destroyed by the Swordfish biplanes, first crippling it and then the Royal Navy catching up and pounding it into submission. The Tirpitz had a much less eventful career. The Tirpitz, basically after the Bismarck was lost, Hitler became very protective of his battleships as a pride position as opposed to a more strategic one. They had to argue for the Tirpitz to remain in commission with the rest of the German surface fleet, and basically it became a fleet in being. That is, that the German surface fleet was there. It didn't do too many actions, though, and it just tied down Royal Navy resources in the North Sea, as opposed to the U-boat arm, which was active throughout the entire of World War II. The Tirpitz was also destroyed by aircraft. The British had developed bombs basically designed to take out the Tirpitz, and they were using Lancasters, which were able to drop 12,000-pound bombs on it. It capsized the Tirpitz, and like the Bismarck, most of the crew perished as well. Looking back at the Bismarck and the Tirpitz, modern historians can say they were a waste of resources, or that they were, not properly employed. But at the time, you have to understand that when the Germans went about developing these ships, the aircraft carrier had not become a proven war weapon yet. It wasn't until, later in the war that aircraft carriers took dominance of the seas. Had Germany completed their battleship program with the 2 Bismarck-class battleships and then the 6 H-class battleships, they might have been able to wreak havoc in the North Atlantic, more so than they did. But looking back through history with today's knowledge, aircraft carriers would have been the way to go. Of course, hindsight's 2020, and the German aircraft carrier Graf Zeppelin never really left port under construction for most of the war. It stayed as a pet project and then scrap metal towards the end. Well, I guess that'll about do it today for the Bismarck and the Tirpitz. I will be happy to take any feedback on this first video. I already know I have a lot to improve on, but that said, it's a learning process, and we learn through feedback, and that's how we grow. I appreciate y'all listening, and until next time, take care.